In the quiet of the evening, where shadows softly play, a fairy tale wolf sheds his skin, gently drifting away, with a twinkle in his eye and a heart full of dreams. He waits for the Friday night glow, where the magic redeems. Oh, the wolf in the moonlight, he's found his true call, reading tales of wonder for one and for all. In a world of stars dancing, his spirit takes flight, with stories of beauty under the starlit night. He picks up a book, the pages worn and wise, every line a whisper under the vast skies, from far off lands where the wild things roam, to enchanted forests where the heart finds home. Oh, the wolf in the moonlight, he's found his true call, reading tales of wonder for one and for all. In a world of stars dancing, his spirit takes flight, with stories of beauty under the starlit night. With every word he reads, he casts a spell of peace, transporting all who listen to a land where joy won't cease. For in these fairy tales, amidst the laughter and tears, the wolf finds his solace, he conquers his fears. As the night grows deeper, he serenades the moon with melodies that linger, a soft and soothing tune. In this sacred hour, where magic abounds, the fairy tale wolf writes love into sound. Oh, the wolf in the moonlight, he's found his true call, reading tales of wonder for one and for all. In a world of stars dancing, his spirit takes flight, with stories of beauty under the starlit night. So if you hear a whisper beneath the silver skies, know it's the fairy tale wolf letting his heart rise.
Really weird. Sounds like that song cuts off early. As it gives like the really quiet part, and she's saying the lines, and then it just restarts automatically. But welcome in. It's Friday night, and we are going to finish Prince Prigio, since I kind of stopped before it was done last week, when I was just tired and thought it was going to be a lot longer. Then I finished, and then I looked at it, and I only had 3 chapters left, so I could have probably finished it last week. But instead, we're going to finish it this week and get into the second book about Prince Ricardo. this music has issues too. I kind of wish I knew how much it would be to commission music, but then I also don't have any income, except book sales and subscriptions and stuff I get here, so there's not really any way I can afford to do it yet. But it's a dream. I do need to seriously buckle down and get to work on book 4 of the Grimm's Fairy Tales. I normally do 1 or 2 more books for it. Then I might start picking on Hans Christian Andersen. Because Seafoam! I do have an entire page of just what I've read on Friday Night Fairy Tales. Starting at the beginning. Let me see if I can find my list real quick. Okay, Friday Night Fairy Tales. Started January 14th of 2022. The first week of Friday Night Fairy Tales actually started on my mom's birthday. We did the Frog King, or the Frog Prince, Companionship of the Cat and Mouse, Virgin Mary's Child, Good Bowling, Card Playing, The Wolf and Seven Kids, Nightingale and the Blind Worm, Stolen Pennies, Hand with a Knife, 12 Brothers, Riff Raff, Little Brother, Little Sister, Rapunzel, Three Little Men in the Forest, Nasty Flag Spinning, and Hansel and Gretel. Well, we went through Riff Raff, then we got to Valentine's Day, which I had longer stories, so I didn't go as long. I think I went maybe a little... No, I think I still did about 2 hours, but stories were longer. Then I did February 25th, and I started with Hansel and Gretel. Then did Fix It Up, White Snake, Journey of the Straw, the Coal and the Bean, Fisherman and His Wife. Then the next week was Brave Tailor. Well, first there was Cinderella. And from there I lost track of what I was doing, and I skipped ahead like a couple of weeks for which stories I read. So book 2 is not in order with the streams. Book 3 is back in order with the streams. So I already know which stories I'd have to put in book 4. Little Magic Table, Golden Donkey, and Club and Sack. And of course, Tablecloth, Knapsack, Cannon Hat, and Horn. Then I get to do Mrs. Fox. That one I will have loads of commentary on. It was an hour long on its own. Then I had the Elves and the Shoemaker, the Elves and the Servant Girl, who acts as Godmother, and the woman whose child did exchange. So it's a changeling story. Then I've got the Robber Bridegroom, which is another... No, it's not really all that long. It's maybe 7 minutes. Yeah, I'm trying to figure out what stories to put in book 4 right now, because I need to get started writing it. And of course I base the writing off of the streams. And I was reading Jack Sipes' book back then, so I'll get to it eventually. Kinda wish the ones I had were selling decently, but I'm not gonna hold my breath on that. There's so many people redoing the fairy tales right now that this little bookstore wolf is not gonna be able to cope with a lot of it, so... What really annoys me is all the people that are just straight republishing all the books. Like, okay, well, it's public domain. Let's just go ahead and copy paste and put in a new book. And I look at those books when they're published, because I pick up a few of them, and they didn't even bother fixing typos from the original prints. Like, dude, if you're going to reprint a book, fix it. That's what I like doing. I like making sure the stories are readable. Because the language can be confusing. And when I go through and translate it, I try to translate it more in what it means to say, as opposed to what it does say. Because no translation is perfect. Language changes, meanings change, and fairy tales need to be updated. I mean, Andrew Lang said that modern fairies don't talk slang or anything else, but yeah, the ones from the fairy tales wouldn't. It's a completely different time period. If people were doing fairy tales today, because of course fairies are still having to interact with humans anyway, but fairies would pick up new language. That's just common sense. Everyone's language changes with time. Thou art not going to resist thine changes upon thine phrase words, whether hither or thither. No one uses those anymore. I mean, hither and thither, it's here and there. Come on, translate it. Anyway, enough of my ranting. It is 9:08, so we'll get over here to this window and look at the book we're going to get into. So, no cats on the bed. That may change sometime during the night. Depends on how sleepy the cats get. I still think it's funny this book has a printing of the check that King Grobny wrote for his son. But we had finished chapter 15. I originally thought there were what is a fiddle? There's a fiddle in chat if anyone wants one. I may as well try to get it. And I will copy that. I might do like Dustin and set up an auto command. Except it wouldn't auto command under my name, it would auto command under Kel. And Kel doesn't need to catch Pokemon. I would hate to think of how many Pokemon she'd have. But anyway, let us get into the story. To adjust my audio so I'm not hearing all the streams I'm lurking in as loud. Because I stream and I try to support other streamers, so I lurk in a lot of streams. I can only officially lurk in 3 streams, apparently. But anyway, let's get into the story before I completely waste more time. Prince Prigio, Chapter 16, A Melancholy Chapter. The prince had gone some way when the prince had gone some way when the king called after him. How he wished he had the 7-league boots on, or that he had the cap of darkness in his pocket. If he had been so lucky, he would now have got back to Blackstone and crossed the border with Lady Rosalind. $1 million of money may not seem like much, but a pair of young people who really love each other could live happily on less than the check he had in his pocket. However, the king shouted very loud, as he always did when he meant to be obeyed, and the prince sauntered slowly back. "Prigio," said his majesty, "where are you off to? Don't you remember that this is your wedding day? My proclamation offered not only the money, which you have, but the hand of Lady Melinda, which the court chaplain will presently make your own. I congratulate you, sir. Melinda is a dear girl." "I have the highest affection and esteem for my cousin, sir," said the prince. "But I will never marry him," cried poor Melinda, kneeling at the throne, where her streaming eyes and hair made a pretty touching picture. "Never,
I despise him.
I was about to say, sir, the prince went on, that I cannot possibly have the pleasure of my wedding my cousin. A family giblet, I presume. Is it in good working order? Asked the king of the family executioner, a tall, gaunt man in black and scarlet, who was only employed in the case of members of the blood royal. Never better, sire, said the man, bowing with more courtliness than his profession indicated. Very well, said the king. Prince Prigio, you have your choice. There is the gallows, and here is Lady Melinda. My duty is painful, but clear. A king's word cannot be broken. Molly or the gibbet? The prince bowed respectfully to Lady Melinda. Madam, my cousin, he said, your clemency will excuse my answer, and you will not misinterpret the apparent discourtesy of my conduct. I am compelled, almost unwillingly, to slight your charms and to select the extreme rigor of the law. Executioner, lead on. Do your duty. For me, Prigio es pret. For this was his motto, and he meant for that he was ready. Poor Lady Melinda could not but be hurt by the prince's preference for death over marriage. Death or marriage over her, little as she liked him.
Is life, then, so worthless?
And is Melinda so terrible a person? So dumb.
Is life, then, so worthless, and is Melinda so terrible a person that you prefer those arms,
as she pointed to the gibbet,
to these?
Here she held out her own, which were very white, round, and pretty. For Melinda was a good-hearted girl. She could not bear to see Prigio put to death. And then, perhaps, she reflected that there are worse persons in the queenship of Pantuflia. For Alfonso was gone. Trying would not bring him back. Ah, madam, said the prince, you are forgiving.
You are brave,
said Melinda, feeling quite a respect for him. But neither your heart nor mine is ours to give. Since mine was another's, I understand too well the feeling of yours. Do not let us buy life at the price of happiness and honor. Then, turning to the king, the prince said, Sir, is there no way but death or marriage? You cannot keep half only your promise. If I accept the reward, I must also unite myself with my unwilling cousin. Cannot the whole proclamation be annulled, and will you consider the bargain void if I tear up this flimsy scroll? And here the prince fluttered the check for £1,000,000 in the air. For a moment the king was tempted, but then he said to himself, Never mind, it's only an extra penny on the income tax. Then keep your dross, he shouted, meaning £1,000,000. But let me keep my promise. To the chapel at once. Or, and he pointed to the executioner, the word of a king of Pantuflia is sacred. And so is that of a crown prince, answered Prigio. Mine is pledged to a lady. You shall be a mourning bride, cried the king savagely. Unless, here he paused for a moment, unless you bring me back Alfonso and Enrico, safe and well. The prince thought for the space of a flash of lightning. I accept the alternative, he said, if your majesty will grant me my conditions. Name them, said the king. Let me be transported to Gluckenstein, left there unguarded, and if in 3 days you do not return my brothers safe and well to your majesty shall have spared a cruel duty, Prigio of Pantuflia will perish by his own hand. The king, whose mind did not work very quickly, took some minutes to think it over. Then he saw by granting the prince's conditions he would either recover his 3 sons, or, at least, get rid of Prigio without unpleasantness of having executed. For though some kings have put their eldest sons to death, and most have wished to do so, they have never been better loved by the people for their Roman virtue. Honor bright, said the king at last. Honor bright, answered the prince, and for the first time in many months, the royal father and son shook hands. "For you, madam," said Prigio in a stately way to Lady Melinda. "In less than a week, I trust we shall be taking our vows at the same altar, and at the close of the ceremony which finds us cousins, and will still leave us brother and sister." Poor Melinda merely stared, for she could not imagine what it meant. In a moment he was gone, and having taken, by the king's permission, the fine carpet, he was back at the ambassador's house in Gluckstein. I mean, he does have a cap of wishing. I don't think the cap has the same stipulations as flame. Unless he's really definite on how he words wishing. Anyway. Chapter 17. The Black Cat and the Brethren. Who was glad to see the prince if it was not Lady Rosalind? The white roses of her cheeks turned to red roses in a moment, and then back to white again. They were so alarmed at the change. So the two went to the gardens together, and talked about a number of things. But at last the prince told her that, before 3 days were over, all would be well, for all would be over with him. For either he would have brought his brothers back, sound and well, to Falkenstein, or he would not survive his dishonor. "It is no more than right," he said, "for had I gone first, neither of them would have been sent to meet the monster after I had fallen. And I should have fallen, dear Rosalind, if I had faced the fire drake before I knew you." Then she asked him why, and what good she had done him. He told her all the story, and how, before he fell in love with her, he didn't believe in fairies, or fire drakes, or caps of darkness, or anything nice or impossible, but only in a horrid useless facts, chemistry, geology, and arithmetic, and mathematics, and even political economy. And the fire drake would have made a mouthful of him. Then. So she was delighted when she heard this, almost as much delighted as she was afraid that he might fail in the most difficult adventure. For it was one thing to egg on a remora to kill a fire drake, and quite another to find a princes if they were alive, or restore them to health if they were dead. But the prince said he had a plan, and he stayed that night at the ambassador's. The next morning he rose very early, before anyone else was up, that he might not have to say good-bye to Lady Rosalind. Then he flew in a moment to the lonely old castle where nobody went for fear of ghosts, ever since the court retired to Falkenstein. How still it was, and how deserted, not a sign of life, yet the prince was looking everywhere for some living thing. He hunted through the castle in vain, and then went out to the stable-yard, but all the dogs, of course, had been taken away, and the farmers had offered their homes to the poultry. At last, stretched at full length in a sunny place, the prince found a very old, half-blind, miserable cat. The poor creature was lean, and its fur had fallen off in patches. It could no longer catch birds, nor even mice, and there was nobody to give it milk. But cats do not look far into the future, and this is old cat. Frank was his name. It got breakfast somehow, and was happy in the sun. The prince stood and looked at him pityingly, and then he thought that even a sick old cat, in some ways, happier than most men. "Well," said the prince at last, "it could not live long anyway, and it must be done. It will feel nothing." Then he drew his sword of sharpness, and with one clean turn of his wrist, the cat's head was cut clean off. It did not at once change into a beautiful young lady, as perhaps you expect. No, that was improbable, and as the prince was already in love, that would have been really inconvenient. The dead cat lay there, like any common cat. Then the prince built up a heap of straw with wood in it, and there he had laid the poor puss, and set fire to the pile. Very soon there was nothing left of old black Frank but the ashes. Then the prince ran upstairs to the fairy cupboard, his heart beating loudly with excitement. The sun was shining through the arrow-shoot windows, and the yellow motes were dancing in its rays. The light fell on the strange heaps of fairy things, talismans and spells. The prince hunted about here and there until at last he discovered 6 ancient water vessels of black leather, each with a silver plate on it, and on the plate letters engraved. This was what was written on the plates. Aqua de Fonte Leone. Thank heaven, said the prince. I thought they were sure to have brought it. Then he took one of the old black leather bottles and ran downstairs again to the place where he had burnt the poor cats. He opened the bottle and poured a few drops on the water of the... He opened the bottle and poured a few drops of the water on the ashes of the dying embers. Up there sprang a tall, white flame of fire, waving like a tongue of light. And forth from the heap jumped the most beautiful, strong, funny, black cat that was ever seen. It was frank as he had been in the vigor of his youth, and he knew the prince at once and rubbed himself against him and purred. The prince lifted up Frank and kissed his nose in joy, and a bright tear rolled down Frank's face, and made him rub his nose with his paw in the most comical manner. If you want to know what Aqua de Fonte Leone is, it is water from the Fountain of Lions. That is another story I have told. I will not refer to here. Then the prince set him down, and he ran round and round after his tail, and lastly he cocked his tail up and marched proudly after the prince into the castle. "Oh, Frank," said Prince Prigio, "no cat since the time of Puss in Boots was ever so well taken care of as you shall be. For if the fairy water of the Fountain of Lions will bring you back to life, why, there's a chance for Alfonso and Enrico." Then Prigio bustled about and got ready some cold luncheon from the storeroom, and took all his fairy things that he was likely to need, and sat down with them on the flying carpet, and wished himself at the mountain of the fire drake. "I have the king now," he said. "For if I can't find the ashes of my brothers, by Jove, I'll—" You know what he meant if he could not find his brothers? Every child, please guess. Off he flew, and there he was in a second, just beside poor Alfonso's garden engine. Then Prigio, seeing a little heap of grey ashes beside the engine, watered them with the fairy water, and up jumped Alfonso, as jolly as ever, his sword in his hand. "Hello, Prigio!" he cried. "Are you come after the monster too? I've been asleep, but I had kind of a dream that he beat me. But the pair of us will tackle him. How is Melinda?" "Prettier than ever," said Prigio, "but anxious about you. However, the fire drake's dead and done for, so never mind him. But I left Enrico somewhere about. Just you sit down and wait a minute, till I fetch him." The prince said this because he did not wish Alfonso to know that he and Enrico had not quite the best of it in the affair with the monster. "All right, old fellow," said Alfonso, "but have you any luncheon with you? Never was I so hungry in my life." Prince Prigio had thought of this, so that's why he brought some cold sausage, to which Alfonso was rather partial, and some bread, with which the younger prince expressed himself satisfied. Then Prigio went up the hill some, first warning Alfonso did not sit on his carpet, for fear of accidents like that which had happened to Bentley. In a hollow of a hill, sure enough, there was the sword of Enrico, the diamonds in the hilt gleaming in the sun, and there was a little heap of grey ashes. Kids, diamonds burn at fire. The prince poured a few drops from the water of the Fountain of Lions on top, and up, of course, jumped Enrico, just as Alfonso had done. "You sleepy old chap, are you, Enrico?" said the prince. "Well, come on, Alfonso will have finished the grub unless we look smart." So they came, time to get their share of what was going on. Then they drank the Gomorrah's good health when Prigio told them about the fight. But neither of them had ever knew that they had been dead and done for, because Prigio invented a story that the mountain was enchanted, and that, as long as the fire drake lived, everyone who came there fell asleep. He did tell them about the flying carpet, however, which of course did not much surprise them, because they had read about it in the Arabian Nights, and other historical works. "And now I'll show you fun," said Prigio. He asked them both to take their seats on the carpet, and wished them to be in the valley of the Remora. There they were in a moment, among the old knights of whom, if you remember, the Remora had frozen to stone. There was quite a troop of them, in all sorts of armor, Greek, Roman, Knights Templar like Front de Boeuf and Brand de Bois Guilbert, all the brave warriors that had tried to fight the Remora since the world began. Then Prigio gave each of his brothers some of the water in their caps, and told them to go around pouring a drop or two on each of the frozen knights. When as they did, lo and behold, each knight came alive. With his horse, he lifted his sword and shouted, "Long live Prince Prigio!" In Greek, Latin, Egyptian, French, German, Spanish, all the language that the knights had held, and they spoke it like a native. So he marshaled them in order, and sent them off to ride to Falconston and cry, "Prince Prigio's coming." Off they went, the horses' hoofs clattering, banners flying, the sunshine glittering off the spear points, and off they rode to Falconston. And when the king saw them coming in, I can tell you he had no more notion of hanging Prigio. Chapter 18. The Very Last. The princes returned to Gluckstein on the carpet, and went in the best inn where they dined together and slept. The next morning they, and the ambassador, who had been told all the story, and Lady Rosalind, floated comfortably on the carpet back to Falconston, where the king wept like anything on the shoulders of Alfonso and Enrico. They could not make out why he cried, nor why Lady Belinda and Lady Catalina cried, but soon they were all laughing and happy again. But then, would you believe he could be so mean? He refused to keep his royal promise and restored Prigio to his crown princeship. Kings are like that. But Prigio, very quietly asking for the head of the fire drake, said he'd pour the magic water on that, and bring the fire drake back to life again, unless his majesty behaved rightly. This threat properly frightened King Ricardo, and he apologized. Then the king shook hands with Prigio in public, and thanked him, and said he was proud of him. As to Lady Rosalind, the old gentleman fell quite in love with her, and he sent at once to the royal chaplain to get into the surplice and marry all the young people off at once, without waiting for wedding cakes or milliners or all the rest of it. Now, just as they were forming a procession to march into the church, who should appear but the Queen? If you remember, Her Majesty had been traveling by post all this time, and luckily had heard of none of the doings since Prigio, Benson, and the king left Gluckstein. I say luckily because if she had heard them, she would not have believed a word of them. But when she saw Alfonso and Enrico, she was very much pleased, and said, "Naughty boys, where have you been hiding? The king had some absurd story about your having been killed by a fabulous monster. Don't tell me. I always said you would come back after a little trip. Didn't I, Prigio?" "Certainly, madam," said Prigio. "And I said so, too. Didn't I say so?" And all the courtiers cried, "Yes, you did!" But some added to themselves, "He always says, 'Did I say so?'" Then the Queen was introduced to Lady Rosalind, and she said it was rather a short engagement, but she supposed young people understood their own affairs best. And they do. So the three pairs were married with the utmost rejoicings. Her Majesty never, her life so long, could be got to believe that anything unusual had even happened. The honeymoon of Prince Prigio and the crown Princess Rosalind was passed at the castle, where the prince had been deserted by the court. But now it was delightfully fitted up, when Master Frank marched about the house with his tail in the air, as if the place belonged to him. On the second day of their honeymoon, the prince and princess were sitting on the garden together, and the prince said, "Are you quite happy, my dear?" And Rosalind said, "Yes, quite." But the prince did not like the tone of her voice, and he said, "No, there's something. Do tell me what it is." "Well," said Rosalind, putting her head on his shoulder and speaking very low, "I want everybody to love you as much as I do. No, not quite so very much, but I want them to like you. Now they can't because they are afraid of you, for you are so awfully clever. Now could you take the wishing cap and wish to be no cleverer than other people? Then everyone would like you. The prince thought for a moment. Then he said, Your will is law, my dear. Anything to please you. Just wait a moment. Then he ran upstairs, for the last time to the fairy garret, where he put on the wishing cap. No, he thought to himself, I don't wish that. Every man has one secret from his wife, and this shall be mine. And then he said aloud, I wish to seem no cleverer than other people. Then he ran downstairs again, and the princess noticed a great difference in him, though of course there was really none at all. And so did everyone, for the prince remained as clever as he had ever been, but as nobody observed it, he became the most popular prince, and finally the best beloved king who had ever sat on the throne of Pantuflia. But occasionally Rosalind would say, I do believe, my dear, that you really are as clever as ever. And he was. Prince Prigio. Yes, that was that story. Okay. Sorry, just had to blow my nose, and I didn't want to do that. Prince Ricardo of Pantuflia, being the adventures of Prince Prigio's son. Prince Ricardo is dedicated to Guy Campbell. Dear Guy, you wanted to know more about Prince Prigio, who won the Lady Rosalind and killed the fire drake in the Remora by the aid of his fairy gifts. Here you have some of his latter adventures, and you will learn from this story the advantage of minding your book. Yours always, Andrew Lane. Introductory. Explaining matters. There may be children whose education has been so neglected that they have not read Prince Prigio. As this new story is about Prince Prigio's son, Ricardo, you are to learn that Prigio was the child and heir of Grogno, king of Pantuflia. The fairies gave little prince cleverness, beauty, courage, but one wicked fairy added, You shall be too clever. His mother, the queen, hid away in the cupboard all the fairy presents, the sword of sharpness, 7 boots, the wishing cap, and many other useful and delightful gifts in which her majesty simply did not believe. But after Prince Prigio had become universally disliked and deserted, because he was so very clever and conceited, he happened to find all the fairy presents in the old turret chamber where they had been thrown. By means of these, he delivered his country from the red-hot beast called the fire drake, and in addition to many other triumphs, he married the good and beautiful Lady Rosalind. His love for her taught him not to be conceited, though he did not cease to be extremely clever and fond of reading. When this new story begins, the prince has succeeded to the crown on the death of King Grogno, and is unhappy about his own son, Prince Ricardo, who is not clever, but who hates books. The story tells of Ricardo's adventures, how he tried to bring back Prince Charlie from England, how he failed, how he dealt with the odious old yellow dwarf, how he was aided by the fair magician, the Princess Jaqueline, how they both fell into dreadful trouble, how King Prigio saved them, and how Jaqueline's dear and royal papa was discovered. With the end of all these adventures, the moral of the story will be easily be discovered by the youngest reader. And if not, it does not much matter. Prince Ricardo. Chapter 1. the troubles of King Prigio. I'm sure I don't know what to do with that boy, said King Prigio pensively. If you don't know, my dear, said Queen Rosalind, and his illustrious consort, I can't see what is to be done. You are so clever. The king and queen were sitting in the royal library, at which the shelves were full of the most delightful fairy books in all languages, and all equally familiar to King Prigio. The queen could not read most of them herself, but the king used to read them aloud to her. A good many years have passed, 17 in fact, since Queen Rosalind was married, but you would not think it to look at her. Her gray eyes were as kind and soft and beautiful. Her hair was dark. Her pretty color was like a white rose blushing, as was on the day she was a bride. And she was as fond of the king as when he was on the Prince Prigio, and he was as fond of her as on the night they first met at the ball. No, I don't know what's to be done with Dick, said the king. He meant his son, Prince Ricardo, but he called him Dick in private. I believe it's the fault of his education, His Majesty went on. We have not brought him up right. These fairy books are at the bottom of his provoking behavior. And he glanced around the shelves. Now, when I was a boy, my dear mother tried to prevent me from reading fairy books because she did not believe in fairies. But she was wrong, you know, said the queen. Why, if it had not been for all these fairy presents, the cap of darkness, and all the rest of them, you never would have killed the fire beast or the ice beast, and you never could have married me. The queen added in a soft whisper, blushing beautifully, for that was a foreshadow of hers. It is quite true, said the king, and therefore I thought it best to bring Dick up on fairy books, that he might know what is right and have no nonsense about it. But perhaps the thing has been overdone. At all events, it is not a success. I wonder if fathers and sons will ever understand each other, get on well together. It was my poor father, King Robneo, who wanted me to take the adventures, like the other princes, fighting fire drakes and so forth. But I did not care for it, till you set me on. And he looked over at Majesty. And now, here's Dick. The monarch continued. I can't hold him back. He's always after a giant or a dragon or a magician, as the case may be. He will certainly be proud for his examination at college. He never opens a book. What does he care? Of all the adventures he can hear about. Idle, restless youth. Oh, my poor country, when I am gone, they may not have to be the misfortunes under Ricardo. But there his Majesty sighed, and seemed to plunge into thought. But you are not going yet, my dear, said the queen. Why, you are not even 40, and young people will be young people. You were quite proud when poor Dick came home with the first brace of gigantic fierce birds, killed off with his own sword. You're such a pretty princess he rescued. Dear Jaqueline, I'm sure she is like a daughter to me. I cannot do without her. I wish you were a daughter-in-law. I wish Dick could take the fancy to marry her, said the king. Nicer girl I never saw. And so accomplished, added Queen Rosalind. That girl can turn herself into anything. A mouse, a fly, a lion, a wheelbarrow, a church. I never knew such a talent for magic. Of course she had the best teachers. The fairy Parabana herself. But very few girls in our time devote so many hours to practice as their Jaqueline. Even now, when she is out of school, she still practices her scales. I saw her turn a little doodie into a fish and back again in the bathroom last night. The child was delighted. In these times, you must know, princesses learned magic, just as they learn piano nowadays, but they had their music lessons too, dancing, calisthenics, and the use of the globes. Yes, she's a dear, good girl, said the king. Yet she looks melancholy. I believe myself that if Ricardo asked her to marry him, she would not say no. But that's just one thing they object to the most in Dick. Around the world he goes, rescuing ladies from every kind of horror, from giants, dragons, cannibals, magicians, and the girl naturally expects to be married to him, as is usual, often right. He has no more heart than a flounder. Why, at his age, His age, dear. You are hard-hearted, and you're quite the proverb. Why, I've been told that you used to ask girls dreadful, puzzling questions like, who is Caesar Borgia? Or what do you know of Edwin or Marca? So, I had not seen you then, said the king. And Ricardo has not seen her, whoever she may be. Besides, he can't possibly marry all of them. I think a girl should consider herself lucky to be saved from a dragon or a giant without expecting to be married the next day. Perhaps, but it is usual, said the king, and their families expect it, and they keep sending ambassadors to know what Dick's intentions are. I would not mind it so very much if he killed the monsters off his own sword, but he did that in the first brace, in a fair fight. But never since he has found a way into that closet, the fairy gifts, everything has been made too easy for him. This is the road to glory, or a giant slaying made easy. This is cap of darkness, a poor brute of a dragon can't see him. And his shoes of swiftness, the giants can't catch him. And his sword of softness could cut through the oak asunder with a blow. Hey, Guilty, welcome in. Congrats on getting first. Thank you for that. But you were very glad of them when you made the ice beast and the fire beast fight and kill each other, said the queen. Yes, my dear, but it wanted some wit, if I must say so, to do that. Dick just goes at it with hammer and tongs. Anybody could do that. It's intellect I miss in Ricardo. How am I to know whether he could make a good fight for it without all these fairy things? I wonder what the young rogue is about today. He'll be late for dinner as usual, I dare say. I can't stand want of punctuality at meals, remarked his majesty, which is a sign that he was growing older after all. For where's the fun of being expected always to come home on time for dinner when perhaps you were fishing and the trout are rising splendidly? Young people will be young people, said the queen. If you're interested about him, why don't you look for him in the magic crystal? Now, the magic crystal was a fairy presence, a great ball of glass in which, if you looked, you could see the person you wanted to see and what he was doing, however far away he might be, and if he was on Earth at all. But just take a look at it, said the king. If only he wants 3/4 of an hour to dinner time. Oh. Interesting. There's a note here saying, for the fairy glass. You can buy these glasses now from the Psychical Society at ½ and upwards. His Majesty rose and walked to the crystal globe, which was in a stand like other globes. He stared into it, he turned it around and around, and Lady and Queen Rosalind saw him grow quite pale as he gazed. I don't see him anywhere, said the king. I've looked everywhere. I do hope nothing has happened to the boy. He's so careless. If he dropped the cap of darkness in a fight with a giant, who knows what might occur? Oh, Shell, how you frighten me, said the queen. King Prigio was still turning the crystal globe. Stop, he cried. I see a beautiful princess fastened by iron chains to a rock beside the sea, in a lonely place. They must have fixed her up to sacrifice her to a sea monster, like what's-her-name. This proves how anxious he was, or being so clever and learned, he would have remembered that her name was Andromeda. I bet if Dick's not far off, if there is an adventure on hand, where on earth can he be? My word! Exclaimed suddenly the monarch, in obvious excitement. What is it, my dear? Cried the queen, with all the anxiety of a mother. Why, the sea where the girl is turned all red as blood, exclaimed the king. Now it is all being churned up by the tail of a tremendous monster. Oh, he's a whopper. He's coming on shore. The girl's fainting. He's out on shore. He's extremely poor, blood rushing from its open jaws. He's dying. And hooray, here's Dick coming out of his enormous mouth, with the armor set with sharp spikes and the sword in his hand. He's covered with blood, but he's well and hearty. He must have been swallowed by the brute. Cut him up inside. Now he's cutting the beast's head off. Now he's gone to the princess. A very neat bow he's made to her. Dick's manners are positively improving. And now he's cutting her iron chains off with a sword of sharpness. Now he's made another bow, and he's actually taking leave of her. Poor thing, how disappointed she's looking. And she is so pretty. Say, Rosalind, shall I shout to him to the magic horn and tell him to bring her home here on the magic carpet? I think not, dear. The palace is quite full, said the queen. But the real reason was that she wanted Ricardo to marry her favorite princess, Jaqueline, and she did not wish the new princess to come in the way. As you like, said the king, who knew that was on her mind very well. Besides, I see her own people coming for her. I'm sorry for her, but it can't be helped, and Dick is halfway home by now with his usual swiftness. I dare say he will not keep dinner waiting after all. What a fright the boy's given me. At that moment, a whirring in the air, a joyous shout were heard. It was the Prince Ricardo flying home in the 7 with boots. "Hi, Ross!" he shouted. "Just weigh this beast's head. I had a splendid day with the sea monster. Get the head stuffed, will you? And we'll have it set up in the billiard room." "Yes, Master Dick. I mean, Your Royal Highness," said Ross, the Highland keeper, who had not previously been employed by the reigning family. "It's a fine head, whatever," he added meditatively. Prince Ricardo now came beneath the library window and gave his parents a brief account of his adventure. "I picked the monster up early this morning," he said, "through the magic telescope, father." "What country was it in?" asked him. "The country where people come from, called Ethiopia." "They're Natchez." "And what part of the globe is Ethiopia, Ricardo?" "Oh, I don't know. Asia, perhaps," answered the prince. The king groaned. "That boy will never understand our foreign relations. Ethiopia is in Asia," he said to himself, but he did not choose to make any remark at the moment. The prince ran upstairs to dress. On the stairs he met Princess Jaqueline. "Oh, Dick, are you hurt?" she said, turning very pale. "No, not I, but the monster is. I had a capital day, Jack. Rescued a princess, too." "Oh, was she very pretty, Dick?" "Oh, I don't know. Pretty enough, I dare say. Much like other girls. Why, you look quite white. What's the matter?" Now you look all right again, for indeed the Princess Jaqueline was blushing. I must dress. I'm ever so late." "Oh, I must dress. I'm ever so late," he said, hurrying upstairs, and the princess, with a little sigh, went down to the royal drawing room. Ads are in a little over 7 minutes. Let's check it too. Oh, Princess Jaqueline. Yeah, this is a 12-page chapter, so I don't think I'm going to make it in time. But just a quick catch up. This is Prince Ricardo. Prince Prigio, from the previous story, resurrected his brother just using the water from the Fountain Lions, and also resurrected all the warriors who had died fighting the Remora. So, of course, his father greatly accepted him back in public, and he and his new wife, former Lady Rosalind, now Princess Rosalind, went back to the empty castle that everyone had abandoned. And they were living there, and she was discussing about the fact that she wants everyone to love him as much as she does. Then she corrected herself, but no, I just want everyone to like you, because she doesn't want everyone to be in love with him. Because words. So she says that maybe if he took the cap of wishing and wished himself to not be so clever, people would like him again. Oh, thank you for the stretch. But being the clever young man that Prigio is, he wished to not seem cleverer than anyone else. So he remained his cleverness, but it doesn't show. Which, if you go by fairy laws, like I did today, I was actually told not to buy something for someone. So I didn't. I passed the money off to someone else and told them to buy it for me. Therefore, I did not buy it. Therefore, I did not break the rule. It's a fairy trick about following the law, well, the letter of the law, but not the spirit. Like, just because they don't want me to buy it doesn't mean I can't get someone else to do it. But anyway, we are going to take a break and get these ads out of the way so I can continue the story, because I want to see if I can finish Prince Ricardo today. Because I should have finished Prince Prigio last week and set out to read the last 3 chapters today. This one actually has 4 chapters. Oh, it is 113 pages. Dang, I'll be able to. It goes from page 107 to page. Wow, it's a lot longer actually. This Prince Prigio was only 106 pages. This one is closer to 130. Well, damn. I guess I won't finish this one tonight. The chapters that's one are a lot longer, though. But anyway. Let's go ahead and hit that break button. And I'll see you in a little while. 3 yellow forges in a row, and I didn't catch either one with Ultra Balls. What the heck? You know how strange it is to think Prince Dick? I mean, the gamekeeper called him Master Dick, and automatically I think of Alfred. And Alfred is Pennyworth, which is English, Scottish kind of name. The gamekeeper actually says he's Celtic. Anyway, enough of my weird flood logic. Starfire King. That made me wonder about this when it says princesses are taught magic like everyone else is taught piano, but they're also taught piano. Anyway, Chapter 2, Princess Jaqueline Drinks the Moon. When dinner was over, the ladies had left the room. The king tried to speak seriously to Prince Ricardo. This was the thing he disliked doing very much. There's very little use in preaching, said His Majesty used to say, to a man, or rather a boy of another generation. My taste was for books. I only took to adventures because I was obliged to do so. Dick's taste is for adventures. I only wished by some accidents would make him take to books. But everyone must get his experience for himself. And when he has got it, it is lucky if it is not too late. I wish I could see him in love with some nice girl who would keep him at home. The king did not expect much from talking seriously to Dick. However, he began asking questions about the day's sport, which Ricardo answered with modesty. Then His Majesty observed from that he had never ever heard or believed Ethiopia, where the fight was, to be in Africa and not in Asia. I really wish, Ricardo, that you would intend your geography a little. It is most necessary to a soldier that he should know where his enemy is, and if he is to fight the Dutch for existence, not to start his army in Central Asia. I could always spot them through the magic glass, Father, said Dick. There's such a trouble. I hate geography. The glass might be lost or broken. The fairies might take it away. And then where are you? Oh, you know where to go, or Mr. Belsham. Now, Mr. Belsham was his tutor, from Oxford. But I shall not always be here, and when I die... Oh, don't talk of dying, sire, said Dick. Why, you're not very old. You may live yet. Besides, I can't stand the notion. You must live forever. That sentiment is unusual for a crown prince, thought the king, but he was pleased for all that. Well, to oblige you, I'll try to struggle against old age, he said. But there are always accidents. Now, Dick, like a good fellow, and to please me, work hard all tomorrow till the afternoon. I'll come in and help you. And there's always a splendid evening rise with trout at the lake just now, so you can have your play after your work. You'll enjoy it more, and I dare say you're tired after a long day with the big game. It used to tire me, I remember. I am rather tired, said Dick. Indeed, he looked a little pale, for a day in the inside of a gigantic sea monster is fatiguing, from the heat of want of fresh air which are usually found in such places. I think I'll turn in. Good night, my dear old governor, he said, in an affectionate manner, though he was not usually given to many words. Then he went and kissed his mother and the Princess Jaqueline, whom he engaged to row him to the lake the next evening while he fished. Don't you go muffling them when you Lighting that, Jack, as you usually do. Then His Royal Highness, as he lit his bedroom candle. I wish you would not call me Jack, said the princess to the queen. It's better than Lena, my dear, said Her Majesty, who in late life had become fond of her little joke. Hey, Papa Penguin. That always sounds like someone else's fatter. And then I hope there's not someone else. The princess was silent and fixed her eyes on her book. Presently the king came in and played a game with Lena and Paquette. Then they were all going to bed. He said, Just come to the study, Linda. I want you to write a few letters for me. The princess followed him and took her seat at the writing table. The letters were very short. One was to Herr Schnipp, the tailor to the king of the royal family. Another was to the royal swordmaker. Another to the bootmaker. Another to the optician. Another to the tradesman who supplied the August family with carpets, rugs, and others of His Majesty's habit. They were all summoned to be at the palace early next morning. Then His Majesty yawned and apologized and went to bed. The princess also went to her room, or bower as it was called, not to sleep. She was unhappy that Dick did not satisfy his father, and that he was so careless about all of the other things. Why does the king want all these tailors and hatters so suddenly? Telescope makers and sword makers and shoemakers too, she asked herself, as she stood at the window watching the moon. I could find out. I could turn myself into a cat or a dog and go into the room where he's giving the orders. That is awkward, for when the servants see Rip, that's the dog's name, two places at once, they begin to think and talk about the palace being haunted, and it makes people talk. Besides, I know it is wrong to listen to what one is not meant to hear. It is often difficult to be a magician and a good girl. The temptations are strong, stronger than most people allow for. So she remained, with the moon shining on her pretty yellow hair and her white dress, wondering what the king intended to do, and whether it was something that Dick would not like. Stupid of me, she said at length. After all the lessons I've had, why, I can drink the moon. Now, this is a way of knowing that anyone else is thinking of and intends to do, for the moon sees and knows everything. Whether it is quite fair is another matter, but at all events, it is not listening. And anyone may see that, if you are a magician like Princess Jaqueline, a great many difficult decisions as to what is right and wrong at once occurred which did not trouble other people. King Prigio's secret, why he sent for the tailor and the other people, was his own secret. The princess decided that she would not find it out by turning herself into Rip, or the cat, whose name was Semiramis, and so far she was quite right. But she was very young, and it never occurred to her to hear that it was just as wrong to find out what the king was meant by drinking the moon, as by listening in devout disguise. As she grew older, she learned to know better, but this is just the danger of teaching young girls magic, and for that very reason it has been given up in most countries. Huh. Interesting reasoning why. Princesses aren't taught magic anymore because they use it tackily. However, the princess did not think about the right and wrong, and luckily, she went to the bookcase and took down her Cornelius Agrippa, one great tall black volume with silver clasps which nobody else could open, for, as the princess said, there are books which it would never do to leave lying about where the servants or anybody could read them. Nobody could undo the clasps, however strong or clever he might be, but the princess just breathed on them and made a sign. The book flew open to the right place. Chapter 4. Book 4, Chapter 4, about the middle of page of 576. The magic spell was in Latin, of course, for the princess knew Latin very well, and soon she had the magic song by heart. Then she closed the book and put it back on the shelf. Then she drew open the window and drew back the curtains, put out all the lights except 2 scented candles that burned with a white flame under a round mirror with a silver frame, opposite the window. Into that mirror the moon shone white and full, filling all the space of it, so that the room was steeped in a strange silver light. Now the whole room seemed to sway gently, waving and trembling, and as it trembled it sounded and rang with low silver music, as if it were filled with the waves of the sea. And the princess took a great silver basin, covered with strange black signs, figures raised in silver. She poured water into the basin, and she poured it, she sang a magic spell from the Latin book. It was something like this in English. O Lady Moon on waters riding, on shining waters in silver sheen, show me the secret the heart is hiding, show me the truth of the thought of me. O waters white where the moon is riding, show me that knows what is shall be and what has been. Tell me the secret the heart is hiding, wash me the truth of it clear and clear. Am I gonna have to find that Latin? I translate it later. As she sang, the water in the silver basin foamed and bubbled, and then fell still again. The princess knelt in the middle of the room, and the moon and the white light of the mirror of the moon fell into the water. Then the princess raised the basin, and stooped her mouth to it, and drank the water, spilling a few drops, and so she drank the moon, and the knowledge of the moon. Then the moon was darkened with a cloud, and there was darkness in the sky for a time, and all the dogs in the world began to howl. When the moon shone again, the princess rose and put out the two lights and drew the curtains. Presently she went to bed. Now I know all about it, she said. It was clever. Everything the king does is clever. He is so kind that I dare say he does not mean any harm. But it seems a cruel trick to play on poor Ricardo. However, Jaqueline is on the watch, and will show them a girl can do more than people think. As indeed she could. After meditating in this way, the princess fell asleep, did not waken until her maid came to call on her. "Oh, your highness, what's this on the floor?" said the faithful Rosalind, as she was arranging the princess's things for her to get up. What is it?" asked the princess. "Ever so many, 4, 5, 6, 7 little shining drops of silver lying on the carpet, as if they had melted and fallen there." "Have they not hurt the carpet?" said the princess. "Oh dear, the queen won't be pleased at all. There was a light chemical experiment I was trying last night." But she knew very well that she must have dropped 7 drops of the enchanted water. "No, your royal highness, the carpet is not harmed," said Rosalind. "Only your royal highness should do these things in the laboratory. Her majesty has often spoken about it." Yes, you're right," said the princess. "But there's no harm done. We'll say nothing about it at this time. And Rosalind, you may keep the silver drops for yourself." "Your royal highness is always very kind," said Rosalind, which was true, but how much better and wiser it was not to begin to deceive. We never know how far it may be carried, and so Jaqueline found out. When she went down to breakfast, there was the king in a great state of excitement for him. "It's most extraordinary," said His Majesty. "What is it?" asked the queen. "Why, didn't you notice it?" "No, you had gone to bed before it happened. But I was taking a walk on the balcony, and a walk in the moonlight on the balcony, and I observed it carefully." "Observed what, my dear?" said the queen, who was pouring out the tea. "Didn't you see it, Dick? Late as usual, you dog," the king remarked, as Ricardo entered the room. "See what, sir?" said Dick. "Oh, you were asleep hours before, now that I think of it. But it was a most extraordinary thing, an unpredicted eclipse of the moon. You must have noticed it, Jaqueline, who sat up later. How the dogs howled." "No, yes," murmured Jaqueline, who of course had caused the whole affair by her magic arts, but who had forgotten, in the excitement of the moment, that an eclipse of the moon, especially if entirely unexpected, is likely to attract the general attention. Jaqueline could not bear to tell a fib, especially to a king who had been so kind to her. Besides, fibbing would not alter the facts. Yes, I did see it, she admitted, blushing. Had it not been predicted? Not a word about it whispered anywhere, said His Majesty. I looked up the almanac at once. It's the most extraordinary thing I ever saw, and I've seen a good many. The astronomers must be duffers, said Prince Ricardo. I never thought there was much in the physical science of any sort. Most dreary stuff. Why, they say the Earth goes around the sun, whereas any fool can see it's just the other way. King Prigio was struck aghast by the sentiment of the mouth of his son and heir, the hope of Pantuflia. But what was the king to say in reply? The astronomers of Pantuflia, who conceived that they knew a great deal, had certainly been taken by surprise this time. Indeed, they had not yet satisfactorily explained this eclipse of the moon, though they had written volumes about it. Why, it may be the sun next, exclaimed His Majesty. Anything could happen. The very laws of gravitation themselves may go askew. At this moment the butler, William, who had been in the Queen's family when she was a girl, entered and announced, "Some of the royal tradesmen by appointment to see your Majesty." So the king, who had scarcely eaten any breakfast, much to the annoyance of the Queen, who was not agitated by eclipses, went out and joined the tailors with the rest of them. Man, I haven't caught any Pokemon tonight. What the heck? So when you drink the moon, it causes an eclipse. That's rough, buddy. Chapter 3. The Adventure of the Shopkeepers. Dick went on with his breakfast. He ate cold pastry, and poached eggs and ham and rolls, and raspberry jam and hot cakes, and he drank 2 cups of coffee. Meanwhile, the king had joined the tradesmen who attended by his orders. They were all met in his royal study, where the king made them a most splendid bow, and requested them to be seated. But they declined to sit in the sacred presence, and the king observed that, in that case, he must stand up. "I've invited you here, gentlemen," he said, "a matter of nearly private importance, and I must request that you be entirely silent as the duties of your nature. It is difficult, I know, not to talk about one's work, but in an instant I am sure you will oblige me." "Your Majesty has only to command," said her ship. "There have been monarchs in neighboring kingdoms who would have cut off our heads after we had done a bit of secret business, but the merest word from your Majesty is law to your loyal subjects." The other merchants murmured in assent, for King Prigio was really liked by his people. He was always good-tempered and polite. He never went to war with anybody. He spent most of his royal income on public objects, and of course there were scarcely any taxes to speak of. Moreover, he had abolished what is called compulsory education, making everybody to go to school whether he likes it or not, a most mischievous and tyrannical measure. "A fellow who can't teach himself to read," said the king, "is not worth teaching." For all these reasons, and because they were fond of the queen, the subjects were ready to do anything in reason for King Prigio. Only one tradesman, bowing very deep and blushing very much, said, "Majesty, you will hear me for a moment?" "Oh, for an hour, with pleasure, Herr Schmidt," said the monarch. "It is a tradesman-like and unusual thing to decline an order, and if your Majesty asks for my heart's blood, I am ready to shed it, not to speak of anything in the line for my business, namely boot and shoemaking, but keep a secret from my wife. I verily own your Majesty that I cannot." Herr Schmidt went down on his knees and wept. "Rise, Herr Schmidt," said the king, taking him by the hand. "More honorable and chivalrous confession of an amiable weakness, if it is even to be called a weakness, I never heard. Sir, you have been true to your honor and to your prince. The face of few men can bear a chance of ridicule. There is no one here, I hope, but respects that will keep the secret of Herr Schmidt's confession." The assembled shopkeepers could scarcely refrain from tears. "Long live King Prigio the Good!" they exclaimed, vowed that everything should be kept dark. "Indeed, sire," said the swordsmaker, All the rest of us are bachelors. That is none the worse for my purpose, gentlemen, said His Majesty. But I trust that you will not long deprive me of sons and worthy subjects and succeed such fathers. And now, if Herr Schmidt will kindly find his way to the buttery where the refreshments are ready, I shall have the pleasure of conducting you to the scene of your labors. Thus speaking, the king, in another magnificent bow, led the way upstairs to a little turret room in a deserted part of the palace. Bidding the tradesman enter, he showed them a large collection of miscellaneous things. An old cap or two, a pair of boots of a sort of long out of fashion, an old broadsword, a shabby old Persian rug, an ivory spyglass, and other articles. These were, in fact, the fairy presents which had been given to the king at his christening, and by aid of which, and his natural acuteness, he had in his youth succeeded in many remarkable adventures. The caps were the wishing cap, and the cap of darkness. The rug was a famous carpet which carried its owner through the air wherever he wished to go. The sword was a sword of sharpness. The ivory glass showed you anyone you wanted to see, however how far off. The boots were the 7-league boots, which Hop o' My Thumb stole from the ogre about 1697. There were other valuable objects, but these were the most useful and celebrated. Of course, the king did not tell the tradesmen what they were. Now, gentlemen, he said, you see these old things, for a reason which I must ask you to excuse me for keeping to myself. I wish you to provide me with objects precisely similar to these, with all the look of age. The tradesmen examined the objects, each choosing that of his own line of business. "That's a sword, Simon," said the cutler. "It is an Araniferous, a fine old blade. By a lucky accident, I happen to have one at home. It's a small collection of ancient weapons exactly like it. This evening it shall be at your Majesty's disposal. Perhaps, Schlitzer, you will kindly write an order for it, as I wish no one of you to leave this palace, if you can conveniently stay till your business is finished." "Oh, with pleasure, your Majesty," said the cutler. "As to the old rug," said the upholsterer, "I have a Persian one quite identical to it at home, at your Majesty's service." "Then can you do like Herr Schlitzer?" He was the cutler. "And I," said the hunter, "have 2 old caps just like these, part of my bankrupt theatrical stock." "Yeah, most fortunate," said the king. "The boots, now I come to think, are unimportant, at least at the time present. Perhaps you can borrow a pair from the theatre." "As for the glass," said the optician, "if your Majesty will allow me to take it home with me, I'm afraid I cannot part with it," said the king. "But that, too, was unimportant, or not very pressing." Then he called for a servant to order luncheon for the shopkeepers, and paper for them to write their orders on. But no one was within hearing, and in the very old part of the palace there were no bells. "Just pardon me for an instant while I run downstairs," said His Majesty, "and it seems a strange thing to act, but may I advise you not to sit down on the carpet? I have a reason for it." In fact, he was afraid that someone might sit down on it and wish himself somewhere to be carried off, as was the nature of the carpet. King Prigio was not absent a minute, for he met William on the stairs, but when he came back there was not a single person in the turret room. "Where on earth are they?" cried the king, rushing through the rooms and part of the castle. He shouted for them and looked everywhere, but there was not a trace of the tailor, hatter, optician, sword-maker, or upholsterer. The king hastened to the window under the gate, and saw the sentinels on duty. "Hey!" he called. The sentinels turned around and looked up and saluted. "Have you seen anyone go out?" he cried. "Not one, sire," answered the soldiers. The king, who began to guess what had happened, hurried back to the turret room. There were all the tradesmen, with parcels under their arms. "What means this, gentlemen?" said His Majesty severely. "For what reason did you leave the room without my permission?" They all knelt down, humbly imploring his compassion. "Oh, get up, you donkeys," said the king, forgetting his politeness. "Get up and tell me where you've been hiding yourselves." The hatter came forward and said, "Sire, you will not believe me. Indeed, I can scarcely believe it myself." Well, none of us can't, said the swordmaker. We have been home and brought the articles, and all orders executed in punctuality and dispatch, he added, quoting his own advertisement, without thinking it. On this, the swordmaker took out and examined the Andrea Ferrera blade, which was exactly like the sword of sharpness. The upholsterer undid his parcel, where there was a Persian rug, which no one could tell from the magical carpet. The hatter was fumbling with the string of his parcel, and he suddenly remembered that the king, in his astonishment, had not noticed that he had put the cap on himself. He pulled it off in a hurry, and the king saw at once that it was his wishing cap, and understood all about the affair. The hatter, in his absence, had tried the wishing cap on, and had wished himself and his friends were all at home and back again, with their wares at the palace. And what he wished happened, of course, as was natural. The moment the king saw how much talk this business would produce in the country, and he decided on the best way to stop it. Seizing the wishing cap, he put it on, wished that all the tradesmen, including the shoemaker, back in town at their shops, and also wished that none of them should remember anything about the whole affair. In a moment he was alone in the turret room. As for the shopkeepers, they had a kind of idea that they had dreamt something odd, but as it went no further, of course they did not talk about it, and nobody was any the wiser. How that I am, said King Prigio to himself. I might have better wished for a complete set of sham fairy things most likely to work. I should have saved a great deal of trouble, but I'm so much out of the habit of using the cap that I never thought of it. However, what I have got will do very well. Then, putting on the cap of darkness that nobody might see him, he carried all the real fairy articles away, except the 7-legged boots, to his own room, where he locked them up, leaving in their place the sham wishing cap, the sham cap of darkness, the sham sword of sharpness, the carpet which was not a magic carpet at all. His idea was, of course, that Ricardo would start on his expedition, fighting in his fairy things. He would find that they did not act. Then he would be left to his own cleverness and courage to get him out of the scrape. That would teach him, thought the king, to depend on himself, and to set a proper value on cleverness and learning, minding his books. Or he might have locked the things up and forbidden Ricardo to touch them, but that might have seemed too harsh. And, as you may easily imagine, with all the powers at his command, the king fancied he could easily rescue Ricardo from any serious danger at the hands of giants, magicians, or monsters. He only wanted to give him a fright or two, and make him respect the judgment of older, wiser people than himself. Okay, you're using the magic items. I will lock them up. Ooh. Fairies take back gifts if they're not used or treated well. I'm sure that has nothing to do with the story. Chapter 4. 2 Lectures. For several days Prince Ricardo minded his books, and, according to his tutors, made considerable progress in polite learning. Perhaps he ought not to have been praised too highly for this, because, in fact, he saw no means of distinguishing himself by adventures just at that time. Every morning he would climb up the turret, sweep the horizon, even much beyond the horizon, with the ivory spyglass. But look as he would, he saw no monster was preying on humankind anywhere, nor princesses in distress. To be sure, he saw plenty of poor people in distress, and, being good-hearted, though careless, Dick would occasionally fly off with a purse of fortunatas in his pocket, and give them as much money as they needed. It cost him nothing. But this was not the kind of adventure he enjoyed. Dragons for his money. One day, the Princess Jaqueline took a curious plan of showing Ricardo how little interest, after all, there was in performing the most wondrous exploits, without real difficulty or danger. They were drifting below for the light breeze on a hill lake. Ricardo was fishing, and Jaqueline was sculling a stroke now and then, just to keep the boat right of the wind. Ricardo was a very bad sport when suddenly the trout began to rise over the lake. Dick got excited and stumbled out of the boat from stern to bow, tripping over Jaqueline's feet, and nearly upset the vessel in his hurry. to throw his flies over every trout he saw feeding. But, as too often occurs, they were taking one particular fly which was on the water, and would look at nothing else. "Oh, bother them!" cried Ricardo. "I can't find a fly in the book, and least like the black one they're feeding on." He tried half a dozen different fly hooks, but to all no purpose. He lost his temper, got his tackle entangled in Jaqueline's hair, then in a landing net, and though such a big boy, he was nearly crying with vexation. Princess Jaqueline, with great pains and patience, disentangled the casting line, first from her hair, which Ricardo was anxious to cut. Stupid oaf. Her pretty hair. Then from the landing net, but Dick was growing sulky. "It's no use," he said. "I've not a fly that will suit. Let's go home." Then he threw the tin can at the rising trout. "Now, Dick," said Jaqueline, "you know I can help you. I did not learn magic for nothing. Just look the other way for a minute or two, and you'll find the right fly at the end of your line." Dick turned his head away. It is not proper to look at some new magical arts. And then in a moment he saw the right hook on his cast, but Jaqueline was not on the boat. She had turned herself into an artificial fly, a small black gnat, and Dick might set his sport again. "Oh, what a trump that girl is," he said aloud. "Clever, too." And he began casting. He got every trout he cast, big ones, over a pound, and soon he had a basketful. He began to feel rather bored. "It's not much fun taking them," he said, "when they're so silly." That very moment he noticed that the fly was cast off his line. Jaqueline was sitting on the oars. "You see, Ricardo," she said, "I was right after all. There's not much pleasure in sport if it is easy or certain. Now apply this mold to dragon count. Magic instruments. It may be useful when one is obliged to defend himself. Surely a prince ought not to give his whole time to nothing else." Dick had no answer ready, so he only grumbled. "You're always preaching to me, Jack. Everybody always is. You seem to have been born just to be preached at." "Some people are, and it does grow rather tedious for them. But perhaps what Jaqueline said may have made some impression on Ricardo, for he stuck to his books for weeks, and was got into the decimal fractions and lucid. All this, of course, pleased the king very much, and began to entertain hopes of Ricardo's becoming a wise and learned prince, and a credit to the little history of his family. Things were not always go smoothly. Far from it. It was poor Jaqueline who fell into trouble next. She had been ready to lecture Dick when we saw, and took a great deal of credit herself for his steadiness. But one day King Prigio happened to meet Jaqueline's maid, Rosenda, on the stairs. Rosina was a pretty girl, and the king always appreciated her kind independence. He stopped to have a chat with her. "Oh, Rosina, what a pretty little silver cross you are wearing," he said, as he lifted the curious ornament which hung on a chain from Rosinda's neck, which consisted of the 7 drops of silver. "May I look at it?" His Majesty asked, and Rosinda, all in a flutter, took it off and gave it to him. Said the king. "Very curious and pretty. May I ask where you got this, Rosinda?" Now, Rosinda generally had an answer ready, and I'm very sorry to say she did not always speak the truth when she could think of anything better. On this occasion, she was anxious to think of something better, for fear of getting Jaqueline into a scrape about her chemical experiment in her bedroom. But Rosinda was fluttered, and, as we said, the royal kindness, and she could think of nothing but to curtsy and say, "Please, your Majesty, the princess gave me the drops." "Very interesting," said the king. "There's a little moon shining back in each of them. I wonder if they shine in the dark." He opened a door to the cupboard, which had no windows, where the housemaid kept her mops and brooms, and shut himself in. Yes, there was no mistake. The darkness quite lighted up with the sheen of 7 little moons with the silver. The king looked rather grave. "If you can trust me with this crust till tomorrow or so, I would like to have it examined and analyzed. This is no common silver." Of course, Rosina could only curtsy, but she was very much alarmed by the consequences to her mistress. After luncheon, the king asked Jaqueline to come up to his study, as he often did, to help him with his letters. When they sat down, his Majesty said, My dear Jaqueline, I never interfere with your pursuits, but I almost doubt whether Cornelius Agrippa have a good book for a very young lady to read. The fairy Paramanu, I am sure, taught you nothing beyond the ordinary magical accomplishments suited for your rank. But there are a great many things in the Cornelius which I think you should not study until you are older and wiser. What does your majesty mean? Said poor Jaqueline, feeling very uncomfortable, for the king had never lectured her before. Why, said his majesty, taking a silver cross out of his pocket, did you not give this to Rosina? Yes, sire, I did give her the drops. She had them made up herself. Then give it back to her when you see her next time. I'm glad you're a friend, Jaqueline. And you know, of course, that the drops are not ordinary silver. They are moon silver. That can only be got in one way, so far as I know, at least, when one supposes water when he or she is drinking the moon. Now, there is only one book which tells you how that can be done, and there's only one reason for doing it, namely, to find out what's some other person's secret. I shall not ask you whose secret you wanted to find out, but I must request that you never do such a thing again without consulting me. You can have no reason for it. Such a great king might have those enemies who are plotting against his country. Oh, sire, I will tell you everything, cried Jaqueline. No, don't. I don't want to know. I'm sure you will make no use of your information, which you think I should not approve of. But there is another thing. That eclipse of the moon. Oh, Jaqueline, it was honorable, fair to the astronomers and men of science, to say nothing about it. The European reputations are seriously injured. Poor Jaqueline could only cry. Never mind, said his majesty, comforting her. There's no great harm done yet, and perhaps they would not believe you if you did explain. But just think, if some people cease to believe in science, what would they have left to believe in? But you are young, of course, and cannot be expected to think of everything. I never thought about it at all, wept Jaqueline. Evil was wrought by want of thought, said the king, quoting a poet. Now run away, dry your tears. I think you had better bring me back that book, and I will put it back in one of the locked-up shelves. Later, when you are older, we shall see about it. The princess flew to her room and returned with the book. The king kissed her and told her to go and see if her majesty meant to take a drive. Never to see him again, never, never, unless it is quite necessary, said the princess to herself. Indeed, it is not easy to see the king. What a lot he has read. In fact, Prigio had been very studious when he young, before he became a thorn. What a child, thought the king. No doubt she was trying her fortune, wondering if Ricardo cares for her little. Of course, I could not let her tell me that. Poor child. In this guess, as you know, his majesty was mistaken. We seldom happens to him. Wonder who she is, the king went on speaking to himself. What great booby Ricardo saved from wild birds which were just going to eat her. She was fastened to a mountain top, but where? That's the question. Ricardo never had some notion of geography, which it was across the sea. He noticed that. Which sea? Atlantic, Pacific, the Black Sea, the Caspian, the Sea of Marmora, the Red Sea, the Indian Ocean, the German Ocean, the Mediterranean. Her ornaments were very peculiar. There was a broad gold sun on her breast. I must look at them again some day. She said she was being sacrificed to wild birds, which her people worshipped, because there was some famine or trouble in the country. She said she was the daughter of the sun, but that, of course, is absurd unless... By Jove, I believe I have it, said the king, and then he went to the royal library and was looking for some old Spanish book when his secretary came in and said that the Russian ambassador was waiting for an interview with his majesty. Dismal Muscovite, he said to himself. The monarch is not a moment to himself or his private studies. Oh, Prigio, why wert thou not born in a private station? But duty before everything. And wreathing his royal countenance in smiles, his majesty prepared to give Count Snoronsky an audience. It was about the attitude of Pantuflia in the event of a Polish invasion of Russia. The king reassured Count Snoronsky, affirming that Pantuflia, while deeply regretting the disturbed relation between the two states in whose welfare she was deeply interested, would never preserve an attitude of benevolent neutrality unless her own interests were threatened. Give your measures to the august mistress, Tsarina, said the professor. By all means, and an expression of my tender interest in Her Majesty's health and welfare, said the king, presenting the count with at the same time a magnificent diamond snuff-box containing his portrait. The old count was affected to tears and withdrew, while King Prigio said, I have not lost the day, and have made an amiable but stupid man happy. Such are, or rather were, the toils of monarchs. Interesting that we get daily life with the story. Chapter 5. Prince Ricardo crosses the path of history. I say, Jack, Prince Ricardo says one morning, here's a queer letter for me. King Prigio had gone to a distant part of his dominions on business of importance, and the young people were sitting in the royal study. The letter, which Ricardo handed to Jaqueline, was written on a great broad sheet of paper, folded without any envelope, as was the custom then, and sealed with a huge seal in red wax. I don't know the arms, Ricardo said. Oh, Ricardo, how you do neglect your heraldry. Old Greenstocking is in despair of your ignorance. Now, Greenstocking was the chief herald of Pantufla, just like the Blue Mantle in England. Why, these are the royal arms of England, you great ignorant Dick. Rome isn't England, is it? And the postmark says Roma. That's Roman some lingo, I suspect. It is in Latin, I know. Mortis de Roma. Died in Rome. That's a Latin grammar. Let's see what the fellow says, anyhow, added Ricardo, breaking the seal. He grins. Prince, dear cousin, I say, Jaqueline, he's supposed to. Prince. Now it is Prince. He must be an ignorant fellow. People in glass houses should not study thrones, Dick, said Jaqueline. His handsome self, Charles, P.W., said Ricardo, looking at the end. Who on earth can he be? Why does he not put P.W. Charles, if these are his initials? Look here, it's a rather long letter. You might read it to us, Jack. The princess took the epistle and began. How nice it smells, how scented. Paper's gilt-edged, too. Luxurious beggar, whoever he is, said Ricardo. Well, he says, Prince and dear cousin, you and me, oh, what grammar, are such the same age. I being 15 next birthday, I should be acquainted. As the world has heard of the famed Prince Ricardo, whose name is feared, his sword declared, and whoever may be monsters or tyrants, Prince, you may be well less informed about my situation. I have not killed any dragons, there being none of them here, but I have gone under fire at Gaeta. What's Gaeta, Dick? I've never heard of it, says Ricardo. Oh, it is in Italy. It was besieged. Goes on. I'm not told that I did not behave myself, nor disgrace the blood of Bruce. I've heard of Robert Bruce, said Dick. He was a man who did not kill the spider, but he cracked the head of Sir Bottom with one whack of his axe. I remember him well enough. Well, your correspondent seems to be a descendant of his. Well, that's getting more interesting, said Dick. I wish my father would go to war with somebody with the sort of sharpness I'd make an enemy whistle. Drive on, Jack. As a prince in distress, I appeal to your valors, so renowned in Europe. I'm kept out of my own. My royal father, King James, well, this is the worst spelling I ever saw. It means King James. My royal father, King James, being driven to exile by a cruel usurper, the Elector of Hanover. King James is old and likes a quiet life, but I am determined to make an effort. If I go alone, then Europe shall here be the Prince Charles. Having heard, as who is not, of your Royal Highness's courage and swordsmanship, I throw myself at your feet and implore you to assist a prince in distress. Let our swords be drawn together for the cause of freedom in an outraged country, my own. I remain, Prince and dear cousin, Charles, P.W. P.W. means Prince of Wales, added Jaqueline. He's turned out of England, you know, and he lives in Rome with his father. I like that chap, said Prince Ricardo. Does not spell very well, as you say, but I sometimes make mistakes myself. And I like your spirit. I've been looking out for an adventure, but the big game is getting shy, and my sword rusts in the scabbard. I'll tell you what, Jack, I've got an idea. I'll put him on the throne of his fathers. It's as easy as showing peas. And as for that other fellow, the elector, I'll send him back to Hanover, wherever that may be, and he can go back to electing, polling his vote in peace and quietness at home. Just wait till I spot him in places. The prince ran up to the turret, fetched the magic spyglass, and looked to London, Rome, and Hanover, as you would on a map. Oh, Dick, how do you mean to do it? Do it? Nothing simpler. I just take my 7-legged boots and run up to Rome, pick over Prince Charles, and put him on the magic carpet, fly to London, slap the cap of darkness on him so nobody can see him, and sit him down on the throne of his fathers. Pick up the elector, carry him over his beloved Hanover, and the trick is done. What they call bloodless revolution in the history books. But if the English don't like Prince Charles, when they get him? Like him? They're sure to like him, a young fellow like that. Besides, I'll take the sword with me in case of accidents. Dick, it is your father's rule that you never meddle in the affairs of other countries, and never to start an expedition when he is not at home. Oh, he won't mind this time. There's no kind of danger. I'm sure he will approve of the principle of the thing. Kings must stick up for each other. Why, some elected characters might come here and kick us out. Your father is not the sort of king who is to be kicked out, said Jaqueline. But there was no use in talking to Dick. He made his simple preparations and announced that he would be back in time for luncheon. But what had poor Jaqueline to do? She was extremely anxious. She knew, as we saw, that King Prigio had intended about changing the fairy things for others that did not work. She was certain Dick would get himself into a scrape. How was she to help him? She made up her mind quickly while Dick was putting his things together. She told the Queen, it was the nearest truth she could think of, that she was going for a turn with Dick. Then she changed herself into a mosquito, a kind of gnat that bites, and hid herself under the fold of Dick's coat. Of course, he knew nothing about her being there. Then he started off in the 7-legged boots, and before he could say Jack Robinson, he was in Rome, in the grounds of a splendid palace called the Villa Borghese. There he saw an elderly gentleman, great curled wig, sound asleep on a seat beneath a tree. The old gentleman had a long, pale, melancholy face. Across his breast was a blue ribbon with a star. How charged was King James with the handsome prince, who he had a love affair with Beatrix Esmond 30 years ago. Near him were 2 boys, not quite so old as Prince Ricardo. The younger was a pretty dark boy, with a little funny roundabout white wig. He was splendidly dressed in a light blue silk coat, and a delicate little lace scarf was tied around his neck. He had lace ruffles falling down the little ringed hands. He had a pretty sword with a gold handle set in diamonds. In fact, here's a picture of a little dandy. The other had a broad Scotch bonnet and no wig, and beautiful silky yellow socks kept about his shoulders. He had laid his sword on the grass. He was dressed in a tartan, which Ricardo had never seen before, and he wore a kilt, which was new to Ricardo, who wondered at his bare legs, for he was wearing shoes with no stockings. In his hand was a curious club with a long, slim handle and a head made of heavy with lead, defended with a horn. With this he was aiming a little white ball, and suddenly he swung the club up and sent the ball out of the air in sight over several trees. Prince Ricardo stepped up to this boy and took off his cap and said, I think I have the honor of addressing the Prince of Wales. Prince Charles started at the sight of the gentleman in long riding boots, girt with a broadsword, which was not then generally worn, carrying a Persian rug under his arm. That is what I'm called, sir, he said, by those who give me the title which is right in my mind. May I inquire the reason which offers the pleasure of this unexpected interview? Oh, I'm Ricardo of Pantuflia, says Dick. I had a letter from you this morning, and believe you want to see me. From Pantuflia, sir, said Prince Charles. Well, that is hundreds of leagues away. It is a good distance, said Dick, but a mere step when you wear 7-league boots like mine. My dear Prince, said Charles, throwing himself into his arms with rapture, and kissing him in an Italian fashion, which Dick did not like. You are indeed worthy of your reputation. These are celebrated 7-league boots. Harry, he cried to his brother, come here at once and let me present you to His Royal Highness, our illustrious ally, Prince Ricardo of Pantuflia. The Duke of York, Prince Ricardo of Pantuflia, gentlemen, know each other. The prince bowed in a most stately manner. "I say," said Dick, who was seldom at all up to standard royal conversation, "what's the game you're playing? It's new to me. You sent the ball a tremendous long shot." "The game is called golf, and is a favourite pastime of loyal Scottish subjects," said Prince Charles. "For that reason I may be able to share the amusements of my people, whom I soon hope to lead to glorious victory, followed by a peaceful and prosperous reign. I am acquiring a difficult art. I'm practicing walking without stockings, too, to harden my feet," he said in a familiar tone of voice. "I fancy there are plenty of long marches before me, and I would not be a spear's length behind the hardiest Highlander." "By Jove, I respect you," said Dick, with the greatest sincerity, "but I don't think, with me on your side, you will need to make many marches. It will be on plain sailing." "Pray explain your plans," said Prince Charles. The task of conquering back the throne of my fathers is not so simple as you seem to suppose." "Oh, I've done a good many difficult things," said Dick, modestly. "The conqueror of a magician, Gorgonzola, a giant who never knew that when he had enough, need not tell me that," said Prince Charles, with a courteous allusion of two of Ricardo's most prestigious adventurers. "Oh, I've been very little proud of it, really," said Dick, blushing. "Anyone could do as much with the fairy things, which no doubt you have heard. With my sword of sharpness and cap of darkness and so forth, you have a great pull over almost anything." "And you really possess those talismans," said the prince. "Oh, certainly I do. See how short a time I took from coming to your call from Pantuflia." "And his holy church," asked the Duke of York with anxiety, "give it her sanction and blessings to those instruments of an art usually in her wisdom forbidden?" "Oh, never mind the Holy Church, Harry," said Prince Charles. "This is business. Besides, English are Protestants." "I pray for their conversion daily," said the Duke of York. "Then justifies the means, you know," answered Prince Charles. "All's fair in love and war." "I should think so," said Ricardo, "especially given those brutes of electors. They give troublesome at home sometimes." "You, too, are plagued with an elector?" asked Prince Charles. "An elector? Thousands of them," answered Dick, who never could understand anything about politics. Prince Charles looked puzzled, but requested Dick to explain his plan. They sat down on the grass, and Ricardo showed them how he meant to manage it, just as he had told Jaqueline. As he said, nothing could be simpler. "Let's start at once," he said, inducing Prince Charles to sit down on the magic carpet. "England to St. James's Place." But nothing happened. The carpet was not the right magic carpet, but the one which King Prigio had put in its place. "Get on to England, I said," cried Dick. But there they remained, under a chestnut tree, sitting on a carpet above the flowery grass. Prince Charles leaped to his feet, his face like fire, his eyes glowing. "Enough of this fooling, sir," he said. "It is easy but cowardly to mock an unfortunate prince. Take your carpet and be off with you out of my garden, so the soldiers shall taste my club." "There has been some mistake," Ricardo said. "The wrong carpet has been brought by accident, or the carpet has lost its power. In the sacred city, blessed by the presence of His Holiness the Pope, and relics of so many martyrs and saints, magic may cease to be potent," said the Duke of York. "Nonsense! You are an impostor, sir. Leave my presence!" cried Prince Charles, lifting his golf club. Dick caught it out of his hand, broke it over his knee as a fine driver, as never came from Robertson's shop at St. Andrews. "The quarrels of princes are not settled with a club, sir. Try and defend yourself," he said, kicking off his boots and standing his socks in the grass. Think of the horror of poor Jaqueline, who witnessed this terrible scene with passion from the fold of Prince Ricardo's clothes. What could the girl do to save the two princes, the hopes of one nation and the respectable minority of another one? In the moment Prince Charles's rapier was shining in the sunlight, and he fell on guard in the most elegant attitude, his left hand gracefully raised and curved. Dick drew his sword out, but suddenly he threw it down again. "Dang it! I can't hit you with this. It's a sort of sharpness that would cut through your steel and break your neck at a touch." He paused and thought. "Let me beseech your Royal Highness," he said to the Duke of York, who was in terrible taking. "Lend your blade to a hand not less royal than your own." "Give it to him, Hal," said Prince Charles, who was standing with the point of his sword on the ground and the blade bent. "He seems to believe his own nonsense." So the Duke yielded the sword. Dick took it, made a flourish, then rushed at Prince Charles. Now, Ricardo was always neglecting his fencing lessons. "Where's the good of it?" he said, "the stamping and posturing and ha-haing. Sort of sharpness is enough for me." But now he could not, in honor, use a sort of sharpness. So he came, waving the rapier like a claymore, and made a slice of Prince Charles's head. The prince, very much surprised, parried and primed, riposted and touched Dick on the hand. At this moment the Princess Jaqueline did what she should have done sooner. She flew out of Dick's coat and stung the old King James on his nose. The king awakened and nearly crushed the princes, so dangerous was his practice of magic art to the artist, and then leaped up and saw Dick's blade flying through the air, glittering in the sun. The prince had disarmed him. "Hello, what's all this?" God, mes boys," cried the old king, in French and in English. And then he ran up, just in time to hear Prince Charles say, "Sir, take your life. You cannot strike an unarmed man. Prince you may be, but you have not learned the exercises of a gentleman." "What is all this, Carluxio?" cried the old king. "Swords out, brawling in my very presence, blood drawn," for Dick's hand was bleeding a good deal. Prince Charles, as briefly as possible, explained the unusual nature of their circumstances. "King must heard both sides," said King James. "What reply have you to make his Royal Highness's statements?" "The carpet would not work, sir," said Dick. "It never happened before. I had used its properties in my own sword," he explained its properties. "Prince of Wales would not be alive to tell the story. I can say no more beyond offering an apology for a disappointment which I could not have foreseen. A gentleman can only say that he is sorry. But wait," he added. "I can at least prove my confidence in some of my resources, not misplaced. Bid me bring you something, anything from the ends of the earth, and it shall be in your hands. I can't say fair." King James reflected, while Prince Ricardo was pulling on the suddenly boots which he had kicked off to fight more freely, and while the Duke of York bandaged Dick's hand with a handkerchief. "Bring me," said his Majesty, "Lord Levitt's snuff-mull." "Where does he live?" said Dick. "At Grudlin, in Scotland," answered King James. Dick was out of sight before the words were fairly spoken, and in 10 minutes was back, bearing a large ram's horn snuff-box with a big carrying horn set at the top, and the Fraser arms. "Most astonishing," said King James. "A miracle," said the Duke of York. "You've entirely cleared your character," said the king. "Your honor is without a stain, though it is a pity about the carpet. Your nobility is not using your magical sword under the greatest provocation reconciles me to this fresh blighting of my hopes. My allies fail me," said the poor king with a sigh. "You have alone failed with honor. Lucio, embrace the prince." And they fell into each other's arms. "Prince," said Dick, "you have taught me a lesson for which I shall not be ungrateful. Any man with any blade, a gentleman should be able to hold his own in a fair fight. I shall no longer neglect my fencing presence." "With any blade," said Prince Charles, "I shall be happy to find Prince Ricardo by my side in a stricken field. We shall not part till I have induced you to accept the sword which I can never hope to draw against another adventurer so noble. In war, my weapon is a claymore." Here the prince offered Ricardo a ruby-hilted Here the prince offered Ricardo the ruby-studded hilt of his rapier, which had a beautiful white skin-sharp teeth. "You must accept it, sir," said King James. "The hilt holds rubies of John Sobeski." "Thank you, Prince," said Ricardo, "for the weapon, which I shall learn to wield, and I entreat you to honor me by receiving the fairy gifts." which you do not need. The ring which makes all men faithful to the wearer. Prince of Wales bowed and placed the talisman on his finger. Ricardo then, after a few words of courtesy on both parts, picked up his useless carpet and took his farewell of the royal party. With Jaqueline still hidden under his collar, he returned at full speed, but with a heavy heart to Pantufia, for the palace was just sounding for luncheon. Ricardo never interfered with foreign affairs again, but his ring proved very useful to Prince Charles, as you may have read in history. So, Prince learned a lesson about not wasting magic. So, who should we raid? Let's see, who was on? Looks like Dusk is back into phasmophobia. Oh, wait. Anyone want to... Let's see a minute. Hey, Melancholy is reading more of The Witcher 3. Or playing The Witcher 3. I don't know. So this is writing. Or if anyone has any requests, I will raid whoever you want me to. So, if anyone has a suggestion, feel free to throw it at me. Okay, here's reading. Witcher, the Blood of Elves, Chapter 3, it looks like. Have people in here to raid? There are the raid messages. Anyone? Alright. What's it? Magic. It's not right. There you go. So, anyone want to raid? No, not silly people. Anyway. He is reading The Witcher. And let's go see what he's up to.
In the hollow of the night, shadows weave and twist. The wolf has told his stories, wrapped in mystic mist, lurking in the silence where the echoes softly play. The echoes of forgotten tales, dimming as they sway. The hours drip like candle wax, slowly melting gold. Lands of frost and twilight, secrets yet untold. The forest breathes a shiver, its ancient heartbeats thrum. Underneath the silver glow, the wild whispers come. Time to close the book.